Joining us now is Joey Krug, currently investor and co-founder of Augur and Eco. Joey, thanks for joining us. Now, I know you can't discuss Pantera, but can you tell us why you left and your plans right now?
Yeah, I can't really, comment on my current plans right now, but, happy to chat about the markets or anything else you guys would like to talk about.
All right. Fair enough. So, I do mention, I said that Pantera Capital's liquid fund you previously managed absorbed an 80% loss last year. Has crypto now hit a bottom in the market? So where do the markets go from here?
Yeah, so I think from here, I think it's very, very likely in my view that the market's bottomed back in June of last year. If you look at things from like a trend standpoint, that June trend was basically intact as well when there was a bottom in November post FTX, when ETH kind of went into like the 1100, if I remember right, range. And so my view is that, we're currently kind of on the other side of the market bottom. And, I think there's probably going to continue to be some chop in the markets as like inflation doesn't really go away as fast as people hoped. But I do think, the market probably bottomed last summer.
We're seeing a bit of an uptick right now. I can't really explain it. Nothing really makes sense to me because on the macro picture, we saw hotter than expected January inflation. Why are the markets up right now?
I wish I knew. I think the, on short-term time horizons, the markets tend to be pretty idiosyncratic. I think on a kind of long-term time horizon, I think there's kind of been a huge amount of development that's happened in this space since like the last cycle, right? And if you look at kind of, Bitcoin right now, it's hovering, just under a bit under 24,000, 23,300 something. And that's not that much higher than the 2017 peak. But if you look at what's happened in crypto since then, there's orders of magnitude of improvement on pretty much every like fundamental metric of usage, development, projects in the space, that sort of thing. And so I think in my view, things just kind of got oversold, last summer and things are kind of finally bouncing back.
All right. What do you see happening with the macro picture in terms of the Fed? Because I mentioned hotter than expected January inflation. That would, I suppose, suggest that the Fed might be a little more hawkish. And we've also learned that Lael Brainard is leaving the Fed, and she was a very prolific head of the doves, an earlier guest of ours said. What impact will that have on risk assets?
Yeah, I think so we saw kind of like a fairly high January inflation number. I think February is going to be fairly high as well, just based on kind of what forecasts are saying. And so if you think about sort of the implications of that, it means that the Fed can't really step off the gas, so to speak, anytime soon, or at least over the short term. And they also can't really say, even if it may be true that January and February are kind of elevated one-offs, and then the path downwards, of kind of, deflation starts, later in the year. Even if that were their actual deep down true view, they can't say it because they basically said that in 2021 and were terribly wrong. And so if you look at it from the Fed standpoint, they're going to have to continue, I think, giving a relatively hawkish message, even if they don't believe that they'll actually end up, doing too much later in the second half of the year. And so I think that's going to be negative for risk assets. But I don't think it's going to be that negative, right? I think most of this stuff is already priced in, going from zero interest rates to, well above 4%, has kind of been a huge shift in the markets. And, whether we end up, plus or minus, 20 to 50 basis points, over the course of this year, it is sort of a rounding error compared to the initial movement that happened over the course of last year.
All right, Joey, let's look at, you mentioned the short-term picture. Let's look at the end-of-year picture. What is that outlook for the end of the year for the crypto industry as a whole?
Yes, I think from my perspective, I think the second half of the year is going to be pretty bullish for crypto. We kind of be going into the next halving cycle in 2024. I think most people who were going to sell crypto have already sold. I think if you look at things like the kind of ETH Shanghai fork, where staked ETH will actually be liquid, there's a lot of people saying that, oh, everyone's just going to sell off. But I actually don't think there'll be that big of a price impact when that happens, because people who stake their ETH and locked it up are the people who are kind of least likely to sell anyways. They're very like diehard, ETH supporters. If you wanted liquidity, you probably would have used like Lido, or just not staked at all. And so I think there's some stuff that's kind of like overhangs on the markets that people are kind of paranoid about, maybe like waiting to buy until after they happen, that I think will probably actually just be sort of non-events. And so from my perspective, I think that means that you end up with a lot of sort of net buy pressure over kind of the remaining, quarters as we get later into this year.